Hi, welcome to a video training session for Migration Manager for Exchange. In this video, we are going to discuss training for Manager for Exchange on-prem scenario only. Although Migration Manager for Exchange can do a cloud migration, we can go from on-prem into the cloud. This particular session and video training will be on-prem to on-prem Exchange only. Okay. All right, so let's get started. We'll just simply open the Migration Manager. Migration Manager has two parts to it. There's a QMM for Active Directory and the QMM for Exchange. And on the Active Directory side must be completed first before moving to the Exchange data side. So you can see down here we have Active Directory synchronization, and that's where we migrate all our users from the source domain into the target domain. That leaves behind a record for all mailboxes to be migrated through Exchange for data. So moving over to the Exchange side, we'll assume there is another video that shows the training on Migration Manager for Active Directory, and you can view that at any time. And so we'll move over to the Exchange side once that's completed. So you just click that tab, and you'll come over here, and you'll have an interface here, and you'll see that over on the left side, this is basically your control panel, where you will add your source and target exchanges, and you'll also set up your collection, your migration collections, and there's various things you can do there that we'll get into here shortly. So I'm just going to go through the menu system to give you an idea of what's here. All right, so over here you have the project. Starting with that, you can simply open project. Migration Manager for Active Directory and Exchange comes together. So you will see the Active Directory configuration here where we do store the Active Directory users that were migrated. Okay, so you can go through this wizard and you can see that, okay, I know that I have a project for the Active Directory side on this particular server. In my case, it's on this server. It's the same name and it's at port 389, but it can be different. Here, we're going to select a project from the AD, and that's the one that we used previously before we moved into the Exchange side. Again, that's Active Directory stuff. There's an auxiliary account, that's Active Directory stuff. And now we finally get to the Exchange portion of the thing. This is where all information about the mail migration will be stored in SQL only. We do not store any other information other than the check on the user itself from the Atom project. All other mail messages and IDs and configurations are all stored within a SQL Server database. And here's where you can configure that. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. You can use either Windows authentication uh, or SQL authentication. There's two forms of authentication in SQL Server. Okay, so this is the server instance. You'll basically tell it where to find your instance, and it will retrieve a database list so you can set it if there's previously projects in there that were configured by QMM, or you can create a new one. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to use my existing one. So I just go through there, and it will configure up the project, finish it out, gives you a list of information that you've configured, and away you go. Okay. So now my project is basically hooked up to SQL and I can start to add my source exchange organization. So we're just going to go ahead and do that because there's not much else in the menu system here. Current view, these are very simplistic things and not overly even worth talking about. You can switch back and forth between views. The tools, there's a few options here under here. Agent, they're kind of more about legacy agents than anything. So this here, you wouldn't pay much attention to this at all. This is legacy stuff, and legacy agents, as you'll see shortly, are basically a thing of the past. The newer agent, which is the Mage agent, MAGE, Mage agent, handles everything all the way from Exchange 2003 to both Exchange 2019 and into the cloud. Okay, so legacy agents are becoming obsolete except for public folders. We still have to use our legacy agents for very old Exchange systems, 2003 to 2007. That's when we use legacy agents. But otherwise, if the Exchange systems are beyond that, then we will use Mage yet again, even for public folder synchronizations. Okay, so I'll talk about that a little further as well. This information is not very important. You will not use it much going forward. Yeah, again, this is all legacy information in here, so we're not going to pay much attention to it. Yeah, we'll just leave that alone. There's nothing worthy of talking about here for now. Okay, so let's just go ahead then. The menu system is quite straightforward and simple. And the first thing you have to do is add a source organization. So you're just going to right click on it, add my source exchange organization, and it's a wizard and it's easy. So you just put in a whack whack, and my domain is bilbosource.local. Then I have an account. Uh, Whoops, sysadm. And all right, so you can see here it says add exchange topology only. What we do during this wizard is we read all the information out from the exchange system, including the users, the topology, and everything about the exchange systems, and we populate it into the SQL database ourselves. So now we have a local copy of the information. So these particular settings, you may need to re-enumerate an organization. Maybe something changed in that organization. If that happens, you will come back in here and run this wizard. It doesn't happen that often, but sometimes when they can't find users and things of that nature, then you may want to run through this wizard again. But there's also, you can do that from inside the program here, and I'll show you that shortly as well. But if you find out that there's something missing from the Exchange topology, you'll come back in here and you'll do it here. Users can be added from the jobs, but uh, topology information from here. Okay, so you don't have to check these at first. It's going to get everything if you don't check these. All right, so we'll just put in that information and away we go. Specify, oh, I have to specify my domain first in there because it likes the down level format. So Bilbo src backslash, and now it will enumerate that exchange organization. So I don't have a lot of users and it's just one exchange server, so it's quite quick. Take a little longer on a more complex system. So that's it. I now have my exchange system populated into the SQL database. And it shows my administrative groups. In my case, I only have one. It shows the name of my exchange server. And it'll also show the mailbox databases within that particular server. And when that mailbox databases, I can then see my users in that database. Okay. So the target exchange is basically the same process. Just go in now. Because we are capable of doing on-prem to on-prem, you'll add a target exchange organization. It doesn't say on-prem, but it's assumed. And here, if you were doing a cloud migration, then you would add 365 as a target organization. All right, but this video is about the on-prem to on-prem, so we'll just go through the wizard one more time. This is my domain for my target and my account. Bilbo backslash sysadm again. Oh, and I'm just going to take that off because it's going to get everything, because I want to get the users and all, not just the exchange topology. So I'll say next. And there it is. Now I don't have any users in my target exchange, and the labs are new, so that's why it's very quick. But we can see when we expand over here, now the exchange is added. So now I have two exchange systems. I can now create collections and pairings between my source and target organizations that I've had it here. You can have multiple exchange organizations added for both source and target, and then set up those pairings. Okay. So just to talk about what's more in here, there are properties at certain level. At the exchange server level, recently I spoke of how to add recipients to a database. Remember, we have a local copy in our SQL. So if they go to create a mail collection and can't find certain users, this is where you're going to come. You're going to come in here to that exchange server and say, okay, I'm going to reach back out to your exchange servers. I'm going to grab those users and I'm going to add them to our local copy. So this says, oh, okay, I see what you have for a server, and I found one mailbox database. So I go to the right here and say find now. This grabs all available users that are in there. And then I can say, oh, I see my missing ones. Maybe it's just those two. Highlight them and say okay. And now it updated my local copy. All right. So the next portion of this is you can remove this. Obviously, this is just a simple remove from the database when you're done migrating and you're decommissioning. Properties of the Exchange server. All right, so now we have a connection. So this is what we're going to be connecting to Exchange with. All right, so our mage agent is what's doing the connecting. Once we install that, we have not installed an agent yet. But once we do, this is the account it's going to use. So this is pre-populated already. Bilbo system admin. So mailbox migration. So system mailbox is fine. You can use that most of the time. And that's also legacy. But you can change the system mailbox that you want to use. Okay, but you don't do it that often. And again, the same for a public folder migration administrator mailbox. You can also change it if you want. Sometimes people have reasons for changing that, but most of the time you can just leave it blank. Okay, Active Directory. Here's my Active Directory. That's my resource force for my Exchange server. Okay, so you can see here, just put in the domain name and the account you want to use on it. Sometimes it's the same as the one you'll use in Exchange, but a lot of time it's separated. Default agent host. This is where when you install a mage agent, it's going to default to. So you can set it here. So you have a couple of settings. You can say, all right, this just automatically comes up as on Exchange 01. But I don't like this practice because that's an Exchange server and you shouldn't install mage agents. It's technically possible, but you shouldn't do it. It should go on a dedicated host. Okay, so you can select different hosts here. Select agent host, right? You can select different agents. So I would say this is this machine, so I would set it to that as my default for agents. And if you want, you can register new ones. So just go and find your computer object that you want to now add as one of the options and place it in there. Then you'll be able to see it in your pick box. Okay, or select there and set it. So there, and my same account, that's what I'll use. So those are the settings for that. Basically sets up and gets me ready for putting agents in. Yeah, migration manager fails to delete jobs from the agent database. Yeah, so this is also legacy um, database, legacy agent type stuff. So you don't have to pay any attention to it. Oh, I'm sorry. This was a different agent. I'm sorry. A different message. Migration manager for Exchange fails to delete jobs from the agent's database located in the outdated host computer. Okay, so you may have to clean up systems. In other words, they're saying if you had mage agents elsewhere and stuff like that, then you might have to clean it up. Okay, so just say yes, and that's fine. Okay. Whoops. Okay. So moving on. So that you'll see that on both. It's the same for source organization, the same kind of information that you will see there for settings. So you set that on both, right? Set it on your source and set it on your target. So now your agents will be able to connect to both source and target exchange systems in order to migrate mail. Okay, so now let's collapse that source and target exchange organizations. Now we're going to move on. Let's create a collection and get ready to migrate one of the users as an example. Public folder synchronization. This should be done typically is first, before mail migration. When you get into a coexistence situation, meaning users are operating out of the source and they're operating out of the target, because some users are coming over before other users, so on and so forth, and people are adding to the public folder synchronizations sides, both, they need to be synchronized back and forth all the time to keep source in line with the target. So no matter where a person is operating out of a source exchange side or target exchange environment, then they will still see that information that they need. So typically, people will engineer and set up the public folder synchronization first if they need it. Okay. Now, I don't have public folders in my exchanges at the time, but I'll just step you through. It's a wizard. It's quite easy. It automatically defaults. It sees my source and my target exchange servers. Okay. You can set um, the system mailboxes, so I can just set it to that one. That's my sysadmin mailbox, and I can do the same on the target. Whoops, find now. It finds my administrative mailboxes that I can use, and it automatically gets set up to say a collection one. You can change the name of that if you like, and then you'll just advance it. And it could connect to this exchange because I don't have public folder database, so it just it kind of craps out there. So this is where you would come in and start setting up for legacy agents. This is where you would set it up. Okay. If and only if your public folders are on a source Exchange 2003 or 2007. This is what you're going to use for legacy Exchange public folders. If it's Exchange 2010 and above, then you're going to use the Mage public folder agent, and we configure that using PowerShell commands. It's much more efficient. It's a little more work to configure in some ways, but it's much more efficient and will move your public folders across. This legacy agents have multiple agents. It has a total of 6 agents to work, and the new one has 1 agent. The Mage is a single agent, so it's much more efficient and definitely recommended. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to cancel this. We are not going to set up a public folders, but there it is. Again, you understand for anything source related that's 2003, 2007, you're going to use legacy agents. If not, you're going to use a Mage agent. Okay. All right, so we'll just cancel that. The next thing you may want to do for coexistence too is your calendar synchronization first for the exact same reasons of public folders. People are operating out of both sides often, so they need to see people's calendars. But we don't reach across. So if you we don't reach across organization is what I mean to say, in that if somebody is operating out of the target because they've been moved over, they won't see, they can't reach back to a source exchange organization to see that person's free busy information. So what we do is a calendar synchronization, and we get that information across to both sides, back and forth as needed, uh, so that people can see that information regardless of which side they're operating out of. Okay. So you might want to set up that calendar synchronization up first. And it won't migrate any mail, just the calendar, but it does create a mailbox. The mailbox is created, and then later when you set up a mailbox collection, it will recognize the mailbox already there and then just fill in the mail. Okay, so adding a collection. Here's the first thing. You get this wizard to tell you what's supported, what it's capable of doing. So right out of the gate, you can see that it detects what I have placed in here for source and target exchange. That's why it didn't highlight this, because it knows that I didn't hook up to the cloud. I didn't set my target exchange to the cloud. So this gets grayed out. And same as this one. It's detecting that, okay, your exchange versions, in my case, are both 2016 source and target. It detects that and says, well, this is the only option for you. So, okay, so I don't have a cloud option and I don't have a legacy option. Now, to show details, this will go even further to show you what you can do. So, and from which exchange servers. Okay, so I can do anything 2003 to 2007, all the way to 2013, 2016, or 2010 to 2016 exchange versions to 2010, 2019, or source 2019 to exchange 2019, all on-prem. Okay, so that's all on-prem stuff, nothing cloud related at this time. And that's how you know. You can point out when somebody wants to know, or you can go to the System Requirements and Access Guide, which will also tell you what's supported. Okay. So we're just going to, we didn't install any agents yet, so I'm just going to talk about this, but I'm going to install the agent first. So we'll just close that now, and we'll move on to the mailbox synchronization. And this typically is going to be the final collection you make. And note, you don't have to set up a calendar synchronization. A mail synchronization will migrate everything, including calendar information. Mailbox synchronization is all inclusive because mailboxes are all inclusive. Calendar synchronization, the reason to set this up is because one, you may just want to get that calendar data over there very quickly because people are operating out of there, and you need it there first before migrating, say, mailboxes that are gigs in size, and it would take too long. The other thing is you may have resource mailboxes, and resource mailboxes are going to get migrated in calendar collections only because they are synchronized in both directions. They're two-way sync all the time for the same reason that people may be operating at both sides simultaneously, and they need to have access to that information. Because if somebody in the target is adding information into that resource mailbox, it has to go back to the source, and vice versa. If someone's adding information from the source, it's got to get over to the target. So that's where you're going to do resource mailboxes. Okay. Free busy synchronization. This is very dated. You do not use this anymore. This is back in 2003, 2007 days, but after that it's completely phased out because free busy information is completely contained within a mailbox. It used to be separated out in the 2003 days, part of public folders and Yeah, just a different mechanism. So we needed this, but this is obsolete. Don't use it today for any reason. Do not use this. It should be removed from the console so that people don't mistake trying to set up these synchronization jobs. The only reason you're going to use it is if you go back and you're migrating from a 2003. Well, no, you're not even going to do that anymore because Mage handles that. So this is completely obsolete now. Okay, so just consider that gone. Okay, so we've talked about all these, how to set them up, and we will set one up soon. But first, we're going to say, okay, we need an agent. We need an agent that's going to speak to both source exchange and then migrate my mail over to my target exchange. So a mage agent is what we're going to do. So I go to agent management. That's where I can handle that. And you can register a new agent host here as well. I know we did that up and under the source exchange org or target exchange org. You can do it there, but you can also do it here. Okay. You also have a show log panel. I prefer to right click on my agent and say view log, and that pulls down a copy. But you can show the log panel down here, and it will show real time. Every once in a while, it updates showing you the logs. It's a little more cumbersome to go here and look at it. It's easier to pull down a full copy of it and use Notepad++ on it. So I always keep this off because it causes delays in the updates for the interface here and everything, and it's just a bit cumbersome. Okay. All right, so yeah, I'm just going to add the agent so you can just assign the role. Now, I already put a mage agent, you can see here, on this server. So I already have one agent on there. But you can go and say, you know what, I want to put, these are legacy here. And then there's a native move. And I want to put mail source calendar. Uh, that's weird that the mail. Oh, let me highlight that. Okay, there we go. Assign role. Add agents for role. Oh, it's not there. Oh, yes, that's not there because I already installed it. The role's already on there. So then, sorry, I just got a little sidetracked there. If you were going to repair agents, mailbox synchronization, so you could come here, repair. No, I'm going to cancel that. Sorry. Uh, so let me just revoke role. There's the unified messaging. It's a little strange that it doesn't show where I can add more roles because you can have say up to 10 mage agents on a host and 10 calendar agents, so a total of 20 agents. Okay. All right, so there it just removed it. And then you'll see when you go back to assign role, say, we can say, okay, so there it is, mailbox synchronization role. So I'm just going to go back. That's how I do it. Now, this is a screen I was actually looking for that should have appeared over there, but for some reason it didn't. All right, so that's fine. So I can say, it'll tell me how many's already installed, and then to install, I can put up to two, say, 2 or 10 or whatever I want there, and maybe I want the calendar. I can do that at the same time. So I'm just going to put one calendar in, and native move, you also have the ability for that, but that's really rare. And native move mage is really just a wrapper for the PowerShell commands and is not used that much. Exchange native moves have become more powerful now, and a lot of people are using native move to get things done. It's a little harder to manage large migrations with native move, but people can use it quite effectively for small migrations of mailboxes. Okay, so this will install 2 agents of mail and 1 agent of calendar. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Assign those roles to this particular server. This is the server 1, APO 1. So you click the apply button and let it execute. And we can see over here under agent management, while we're waiting for that to all go in, you can see where you can start all agents, stop all agents, refresh the agent status, and you can remove them from the database if you want. Or remove the agent host, I guess in this case is what that's saying. Something you'll rarely do, but and you can show associated collections with a particular agent, which sometimes comes in handy because if you get a lot of agents in there and a lot of collections, It will become very difficult to manage if you don't know where to find these things when you're looking for a collection. Gather support information will reach out to a system and gather information about that particular host. Uh, that was big in the legacy days. I'm not even sure if it still works. I haven't used it, and it's not something that's used very much. The Mage Agent log captures all the information you need. So gathering that information about the agent host is very, very rare. It's not something you're typically going to use. Okay, so we see 3 checkboxes. Everything went in successfully. Just say finish. And there you are. My agents showed up down below. So I highlight my host again. So these are my 3 agents. And you'll notice if I select these other hosts, Exchange Server, they disappear because there are no agents on those particular computers. Okay. So here we go. So I've got my 3 agents. And when I want to look at a log, these 2 started and this one stopped, Unified Mail Sync 1. And so this one started by default. So if I want to look at a log, I say open log this way. I right click on it, say open log, and I use Notepad++ on it. This opened with Notepad, but that's just for talking sake. Okay, and this is where you're going to track down everything. You'll just search through here for information on your mailboxes. You see here the M, that stands for mailbox, and when it's not directly speaking to a mailbox, it's just doing stuff, it'll say M dash. So right now it's just speaking to the SQL database. It's getting lined up. It's no mailboxes are in a collection, so there's nothing for it to do, and it's not going to identify any mailbox yet. Okay, so it's just M dash so far, but that's how you'll track a mailbox. And in something like Notepad++, you can go through and say this says M60 or something for your mailbox. Then you can just say find every line of M60, and that will show you what's happening for that particular mailbox. Because there's a lot of mailboxes that are going to be coursing through this log, and you need to be able to separate out the lines quickly, and Notepad++ will do that for you, or one of the other good editors. Okay, so we'll just close that down. That's how you get the log. We don't use the show log panel because it's more cumbersome and harder to use. And okay, agent management. All right, so now let's go back and start to say or look towards making a collection. Let's do a calendar sync. So we'll just right click on it, add a calendar synchronization. Now we have to set up the pairings between one source and one target organization at first. So it shows me what my options are because the rest are grayed out because it realizes, detects what I can and cannot do. All right, I come in here and basically it's just my Exchange org and the Active Directory account. Sometimes it's different, but you can select this box to say just use the same one as being used for Exchange, and then it will use the same one that you're using for Active Directory. So I'm just going to go through and Exchange organization and my target, right? And say next again. And agent host server. So this is okay. If there's no agent installed on there that I'm going to set up, then it's going to set it up for me. Yeah. Okay. And the credentials for it. Okay. So just next it through, and it's going to populate the SQL database with this new pairing. Just apply. Update the database. Agent is already installed. If it wasn't, it would roll through the whole assigning a role and create the job and it's completed. So now I have a pairing from source organization to target organization, but I still have no collections. All I have is this pairing, source to target. Now these are not they're both labeled that because that's what they did in the lab, which is kind of horrible. But normally this would be the name of your source and your target. So it would be much more discernible in that case. All right, so now we just say, all right, now I have a pairing source to target, so I want to add a collection to it and get my calendar sync flowing between these two sides of these two Exchange organizations. So I'm just going to call it my calendar sync. All right, and you can put a description in there. I want to enable the collection and enable two-way synchronization for this collection for resource mailboxes only. For if you remember what I spoke about, when people are adding to a mailbox on both sides, then it has to be a two-way sync. But a normal calendar sync for a user mailbox is only ever getting data put into it on one side. If the user is operating out of the source, he's only adding to his source calendar. So what we do is the calendar agent recognizes that and knows that the user is operating out of the source, so it just pushes data to the target. But no data ever comes back from the target because it doesn't need to. As long as it's pushing from where the person is adding the data, then both sides are always updated. Okay? So a resource mailbox, people are adding on both sides. So that's why it has to push both directions all the time. Now, the trick is, what happens when the user goes to the target side or is switched and starts operating out of the target? Then the tool also recognizes that and says, okay, I know that this user is now in the target environment. I'm only going to push anything added to the target mailbox back to the source when it's added. That's it. Nothing will come from the source. It's just pushed from the target back to the source. So people who remain in the source can still see that person's FreeBSD information, calendar data. Okay, so that's the difference there. We don't turn this on because we're going to only put a user into that, not not a resource mailbox. All right, and then you can choose the agent. Often you'll come in here when you want to find out what collection or what agent a collection is using, sorry, then you'll come in here because this is where you'll set it. And you'll see if I go here, I can see that I only have one calendar agent to choose from, so that's the only one. Otherwise, if I had 10 or whatever, they would all show here, and you can choose the one you want. All right, so that's the agent I'm going to use. Then you set the mailbox database for them, and you can choose where you want them to go. So I'm going to say I only have one, so let's put it in that one. Otherwise, there might be a full list here. In most instances, in real environments, there would be. I'm going to put it in that. And you can just say also, just leave them in the current mailbox. Wherever they're found on the target side, just leave them there. Don't move them, just leave them. And that's a nice safe bet. Because this will put in a PowerShell command if it's a different mailbox database than where they are. If they're already over there, if they already exist in the target, this will move it to that new one. It'll put in a PowerShell command, a move request, and it'll move that user from that database into the one you just specified here. So be careful there. But again, support doesn't configure this. It's just important to know how it works. Okay, so we'll move ahead and then say start as soon as possible. So I'll just do that. And the next step is, oh, well, who do you want in your collection? So I'll just go there. I'll say I want to choose a mailbox, but if I cancel this, you can also choose by, you can add a group, and whoever's in that group is going to get added, or you can choose by a container. Okay, so I'm just going to go in and find my mailbox. I'm going to say, all right, find now on this Exchange server, which is my source. And I'm just going to go Bilbo2. I'm going to say okay. And I'm going to say finish. So there we go. We are now live. My calendar sync is now operating. Okay, so I highlight that collection, and up above you can see I've got agent manager, so that'll show me my agents. That'll show my associated agent that I set with it. So there's my host, and there's my agent. And that's under agent manager. Now you can just roll over here and go to statistics, and this is where you're going to see the mailboxes themselves. Okay, so for this collection, I see Bilbo2 failed. The target mailbox could not be found. Possible reason so there was no pre-existing, and that's fine. I don't know why it says failed. It should create. So if we want to see what's going on there, then we'll say, okay, what's going on? Go down to my agent. I'm going to open the log for it and find out what doesn't it like. So trace error, the target mailbox cannot be found. So there's the one that appears in the interface. Possible reason, the target mailbox was not created during directory synchronization. Okay, so I didn't migrate my user, and I didn't mail enable that user. I didn't add it to a sync in the migration manager for AD, which handles mail enabling of a user. So that's what happened there. So I would go back to my AD side, and I would make sure that my user for Bilbo2 was in fact part of the synchronization. Synchronization is the only thing that handles mail enabling. It's the only thing that will migrate mail attributes over and set up a mail user. Migration sessions do not do that, and they will not. If you try to migrate it here, it'll only put the user itself over with all its other attributes, but nothing mail related. Synchronization, the user has to be included in the scope, synced over effectively, mail enabled by it. Okay. Once that's done, I come back, and you can say, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to look at the statistics, I'm going to highlight that member, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to resynchronize, because now I know he's good, so it's going to retry. So it says syncing again. Obviously it's going to fail again because I didn't go through the whole process of actually syncing the user, but this is where how you would troubleshoot that. Start from the beginning, make sure the user's mail enabled. You might want to go to Active Directory if you really get into trouble. You're going to look at the attributes. I usually check the attributes mail, Make sure that's populated. Go to your proxy addresses. What do your proxy addresses look like? Are they populated with what looks like a reasonable amount of mail addresses? And maybe legacy exchange DN is the other one I like to look at too and make sure that's populated. That will tell you, okay, this user looks reasonably set up and mail enabled and ready to go. Okay. If not, go back and sync it again. So syncing again 1 minute. All right, so that's a counter synchronization. So what I'm going to do is, because I know it's failed, I might go back and just turn off the agent. I'm just going to say, you know what? I'm just going to turn that off for now. So I manage my agent. Stop agent. It's stopped. I know it's failing right now, so I'm just going to turn it off. Calendar synchronization. So let's get all that calendar information over there so it's there, ready and waiting, so free busy can be seen from users on both sides in the target, especially as users are coming over, because you're going to migrate so many users at a time. It's never do you see where all users get switched and put to the target side to operate out of right away. So this is why you need that coexistence functionality. Mailbox synchronization. Now we know we've got some calendar data over there just for pretend sakes. And now we're going to go in and say, okay, I have to add a pairing again for my Exchange organizations. So it knows I have Exchange 2016, and I can set up a native move. So now you see that this is no longer grayed out, and we can use it. Still can't use 365, and still can't use Legacy because it just doesn't apply. All right, so let's set this up. Again, you've seen this, Source Exchange and Target Exchange. And this is default message in the mailbox. So you will see when a user gets switched, they receive this message. The default message, it simply says, look, your mailbox has been switched to the target environment now. All your mail is going to show up there, and anything new sent to the source is going to be sent to the target side mailbox. You can customize that message by just going customize the message, right? Here's the standard message. Effective immediately, your primary mailbox is in the new Exchange organization. So you can change this to whatever you want and give them information, but most people, I think, just use the default. Okay. All right. And the message for the target mailbox, message for the source. Yeah. The default for this one is like welcome to the target, I think. Your mailbox successfully migrated, blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right. So we're going to continue go through there. This is for setting up agents again, if none are already set up. And apply. Update the local copy, SQL database copy. Populating, finished. All right, now we have the ability to set up mail collections, and this brings over everything else that's found in that mailbox, including all the folders and the messages, and anything that you can put in there is going to be brought over. All right, we're going to add a collection now, add a mail collection. Mail collection. Okay, let's enable the collection. There's the agent I'm using. It denotes my host, which is good because if you have, maybe you might have 20 hosts out there. So this tells you on this particular host of app01, there is the agent you're using, MailSync. And this will change to MailSync 1, MailSync 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So you can see, right, the host it's on and the agent it's using for this particular collection, which comes in very handy. I'm just going to say leave them in their current mailbox database this time, so it'll pick up on that default. And let's find that same user. Find now. Bilbo 2. I can say OK. Next. Mailboxes will be switched manually. So this is where you're going to change a user from source to target. You can have it done automatically. So if you want, you can tell this particular collection, to switch the user from source to target. As soon as he completed 100%, he will switch, and he'll be notified of the switch. Or you can say, no, I want to do that manually. Most people do it manually because they want to be able to control how many users are being moved across. They don't want to, see a bunch of users all of a sudden being operating out of the target, because there's a lot of other steps that have to go with moving their workstations over, as seen in the Active Directory side of things. Okay, so that all has to be carefully planned together. So most people switch manually, but some do automatically. They just say, yeah, we just put them all over there, and they get that message, and then we've already moved over their workstation, so they're ready to go. Okay, because you can do things in different order, and that's the professional services guys will set up different ways to do things. So there's a lot of different ways. Okay, but in this case, I'm going to say switch it manually. So what that means is now my collection here is now there, mail collection. I'll highlight it, and I'll highlight not the host, but in this, I want to see statistics and members actually for the mail collection. So now I can see what's happening with my user, right? That's properties. You can actually see the properties of a mailbox, like the header information, stuff like that. If you go here, properties, right, shows you these things, email addresses associated with it, and yeah, basically the kinds of things you might find in a PST file. Not very useful most of the time. Statistics. You'll notice under statistics we have two tabs kind of hide here. You've got overview, but then you've got mailboxes. Statistics is always where you're going to spend most of your time. So here's my mailbox. Progress 0%, and it will show discovered items and stuff once we kick it off. But it's not mail enabled, so we know it's going to fail. But this is just to talk about the interface. So yeah, you would right click and say switch. So see this switch button here? This is when you say, okay, let's say that he is progressed to 100%, and you'll get a message on the screen there under the last process, or under status, sorry. It'll say ready to switch. It'll actually give you that message, ready to switch. You can say, okay, I'm just going to come in here and switch this guy. What that does, all that does, is notify the user of the change, and it will change the mail redirection addresses. So when the user's operating out of the source, the tool knows it, and anytime it receives mail on that target side mailbox accidentally, it redirects it back to its source mailbox because it knows the user's on the source. After you run this switch, the user is then in the target, operating out of the target, and we set up the redirection addresses for the source. So any mail that comes into the source is going to be redirected onto the target for the user. So all his mail shows up in the mailbox of where he's operating out of effectively. Okay. And again, you have the resynchronization option when something goes wrong in your troubleshooting and you're trying to do it. This is your quite often going to come in here and resynchronize. Remember, this is not a real-time interface. It takes time to traverse and for error messages to disappear and things like that. So when you reset and do a resynchronization, quite often you're going to wait. You're going to tell the user, say, look, just let this roll for an hour. Now that you can resync the entire collection, say let it roll for an hour just to work its way through, and the errors will disappear or new errors will crop up, and then work on it like that. Okay, so it's not a real-time thing. All right. Okay. So that's basically it. Public folders, countersync, and mailsync, and that's basically the entire synchronization process. Then you're just managing your users from this location. You're keeping an eye on them. They hit that 100%. You can queue up a bunch at the same time by selecting control and say select 5 and say right click and switch them. They get switched, and that's basically it. Now, when it comes to Outlook, we have another tool called CPUU, Client Processing Updating Utility. Okay, and what that does is update their Outlook profile. Okay, so the Outlook has some stuff in it that needs to be pointed to the target, and that's run right after the user is switched. I right click, I switch the user. When I do that, I apply it here. I'm not going to do it, but if I did, then the user gets that message, and his computer would typically get moved from the source domain into the target domain. And when that happens, they log on to the target domain, and CPUU is waiting on their machine upon first starting the machine to update their profile from source environment to target exchange environment. Okay, so that's the step. All right, so you migrate. Let me just start from the beginning and just discuss how this process works. You migrate that Active Directory user, then you come over here and, well, let me start again. You migrate the Active Directory user, and then you can process machines in Active Directory. You can process workstations and get them dual ACL, get them ready to go to the target. But the final move usually comes after all the mail's been migrated over. So migrate Active Directory user, process a machine, get it ready to go, move to the new target. It's still operating out of the source, but it's ready to go. You come in, you migrate their mailbox over completely. You switch that mailbox. The user machine is then moved into the new domain. They log on to the new domain, and the final step is the CPU runs against their Outlook profile so that now everything is pointed and operating out of the target. That's just a typical scenario. Things can be done differently and in different orders in certain scenarios, but that is generally how that's done. Okay? All right. So now we know all of that. We know about the exchange organizations. You know about Agent Manager and basically how to control your agents through here. And statistics. This is an outdated concept here. Statistics are controlled out of the logs themselves. We basically do that, and through this interface of statistics here. This was a legacy location, so don't worry about this statistics here. Okay, it's legacy, it's obsolete. Resource kits are also becoming largely obsolete. We don't use these two things. Don't worry about them for now. If you have a question, ask me, or something arises and you see it, then you can contact support and ask about it. Okay. And that is essentially it in its most simplistic form of how this works. And I'm going to leave that video there. You can play around a little bit with your mail collections and try to put some mail over. See what happens. And as the questions arise, then we will take the next step. We'll do some more scenarios later, but that's the first step in understanding the on-prem migration for Exchange. Okay. All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and talk to you soon.